So as you will have seen in the program, I'm scheduled for a 2-hour talk, which is kind of intimidating. That never happens, Mike. Oh my God, 2 hours! But I don't think I will need 2 hours, but I do want to do two things. First, give you some background and tell you about the project that gave this week its name, the City of Comings and Goings. And then also give you an explanation of the content of this week. So what is actually the question that we're asking, that we're hoping you to shed some light on. And I'm really, yeah, it's like we arranged it, the backgrounds of all of you, which are so different and from different angles. I think that's very exciting and good mix to dive into this topic. And as Mike has said, we haven't done this before in Rotterdam, so it's also for us it's yeah, a question what will come out of it. We just know we just formulated a lot of questions that we don't have the answers to, so happy to work on that together. So first, a bit about the City of Comings and Goings, and I think if you have questions in the meantime, just tell me, because this is, well, it's a story that relates to the project that started 6 years ago. So during the refugee crisis in 2015. So a long time ago, and we worked on it for a couple of years, basically with the office of Crimson. I'm not sure how many of you know our office. A bit. Yeah, a bit. Yeah, it's like this is, well, by now we have already celebrated our 25th birthday. We started in 1994 in Rotterdam, but we're all, well, I don't think you can call that migrants, but everybody of the founding partners came from Groningen, which is in the north of the Netherlands, and which is a very different place from Rotterdam. And in the beginning we were just purely architectural historians, and then working in two different directions. One, what you would figure that a historian does: do research, write, make exhibitions, publish books, write articles, things like that. But we also felt that this historical knowledge could be put to practice, could be made very operational by using it in planning as a means to base urban plans, urban visions, urban future visions on. And that's right from the beginning we have been doing that, working together with architects and planners, being part of project teams, sometimes really big urban plans for like tens of thousands of houses, like Leidse Rijn in Utrecht, maybe you know that one. But also very small transformation projects, etc. Working as advisors or working as designers, hiring architects. So we've been doing these two things at the same time. So you could say that we've always felt the need to be practical and operational, and actually, yeah, be useful. So I guess that's where also this project came from. When this refugee crisis was starting to become visible and apparent, everybody was thinking like, oh my God, this is such a disaster, what can we do? And not only us, but also all our colleagues, and if they were landscape designers or interior designers, everyone was sort of in a frenzy to do something. And so we thought, with the same mentality, what can we do? What is our specific knowledge or expertise that we can put into practice to help out with this? And well, of course, that is then the question arises: what does the refugee crisis actually have to do with architecture, with planning, with spatial issues. And the question that was immediately answered with things like, well, you can design refugee housing and you can, things like that. But we thought, well, there has to be something more profound, and we want to add to this crisis by, well, doing the research in how these two things, migration, refugees, are actually interconnected with spatial issues, and how we can come up with solutions from there. So this is what we started to do. Just by following the news, basically. Maybe you remember, in whatever country you were, I think this happened everywhere, but also in the Netherlands, there were, all over the country, there were protests against refugees coming here, and especially against the asylum centers that were built everywhere. Built or just furnished. So there were some were existing buildings that were used for refugees, and some that were new buildings. Maybe you remember that there were these riots. They were on television every evening, and we found that there was actually a very strong link to spatial policies, because this was in a place called Geldermalsen, a very small village where about, well, I don't think even 1,000 people live there. And they were planning to have an asylum center for about 2,000 people. So I don't think it's very strange that people would feel intimidated by this large number of refugees that would come there. So maybe it wasn't such a good idea. But why did Geldermalsen still want to do this? Because they had this land that was basically meant for an industrial terrain, but which never happened because of the crisis. So it was just sitting there, costing money, having this interest that the municipality need to pay. So they were losing money over it, and now they suddenly had a chance to have this asylum seeker center, and that would solve all their financial problems. So there was a link between these refugees and the sort of spatial policies of this particular municipality. And then another spatial issue very strongly arises from, if you look where the centers are being built, mostly close to the border with Germany. So, and of course, you know that still the place where refugees come into the country, the first place is Ter Apel, which is by far the most, well, isolated, faraway place in the Netherlands, also on the border of Germany. So they're all on the outside of the west of the Netherlands, but still you can see, if you look at the amount of work that is available, the jobs that are being offered, that's all in the West. So if you want newcomers to integrate into Dutch society, there is a complete mismatch between the spatial policy of having these centers on the border and completely outside of the economic center of the Netherlands. And then, of course, if you talk about housing, there's also a very strong clash, because of course the newcomers would need to be housed somewhere. At the same time, there was already then a lack of social housing for a number of reasons that we can go into later. But for now, let me just state that already then there was a lack of housing. So there was also discussion, a political discussion. Who gets to move into this housing first? Like Dutch people that have been waiting for these houses for a long time, or the newcomers that have had to flee their country, etc. So there was a competition on the housing market, and the political discussion was very strongly focused on that. And also political parties like Forum, I don't think it existed then, but PVV, and VVD, so the liberal right-wing parties, used this argument as another argument to limit the amount of refugees coming to the Netherlands. And it was not only competition on the housing market, but also the jobs. Like the argument of they are taking our jobs also was fed. And we were surprised at that point that there was this sudden drama and this sudden crisis, because we have had flows of refugees coming into the country, well, over the longest, well, for the longest time. Remember in the 90s when the wars in the Balkan were in existence, then there were so many people from Serbia and other parts of former Yugoslavia coming here. And also if you look to the future, it's not very probable that this will stop. So if you look at the reasons why people are coming to Europe, it has to do with wars and local conflicts. It has to do with climate change, it has to do with poverty, and has to do with demographics. And all these factors, they don't seem to change in the near future. On the contrary, they seem to exacerbate. And especially if you look at poverty resulting from climate change, then you can see that this is unfortunately not going to diminish, it's going to grow. And even if you think of that's just a very, very small percentage of people, for instance, from Africa coming to Europe, then still these are millions of people that will need to be accommodated somehow. So it is a permanent phenomenon, this migration. And that's the angle that we took for this project. We decided to look at the spatial aspects of migration. We decided to look at migration in Western European cities so as to make them more comparable. Because of course, if you look at places in the US or in any continent, you could find places that are completely defined by migration. But to make them culturally and politically more comparable, we decided to focus on Western Europe. And of course on spatial architecture and planning issues. So we were in the middle of that refugee crisis, and this is also something for Afrikaanderwijk. That in Afrikaanderwijk you will probably find refugees, mainly from Syria, but you will mostly find migrants that have a completely different background. And this is the first thing that we decided to do. Like, let's not focus purely on this refugee crisis at that moment in time, but let's look at migration in all its different backgrounds over the course of history. And well, I thought that was very interesting, because you find that even if about 100 years is not that long, you find that our cities in Western Europe have been completely defined by migration over the last 150 years, mainly since the Industrial Revolution, and also that the conditions that they were housed in, that they found themselves economically, were so similar to the situations that we see now. For instance, this is an image of Berlin called Barrakia. It was a very well-known part of the city at the end of the 19th century, where a lot of people, migrants from the countryside, who moved to Berlin for reasons of job and to work in industry, where they built their own houses, their own slums, as you would call it. So they look completely like these townships and like favelas that we know from other parts of the world now. And also this book, it's called Kingdom Full of Slums. It's about the Netherlands, and it talks about how people were housed in the big cities in, well, about 120 years ago, around the turn of the 19th to 20th century. And it describes a moment in time when actually 80% of people were housed in a one-room house. So the majority, well, by far the majority of houses in the big cities were only one room where the whole family would live together. So again, it's not that long ago, and the housing conditions were completely different. And migration was, well, the most defining factor in the growth of our cities during that period. And it's not even that long ago. This is 1963. And as you can see, it's the same conditions of a favela with self-built houses built of scrap wood, with no infrastructure and no streets, no pavement, etc. And this is Paris, 1963. So also a very short time ago. So at that moment, 2015, everybody was, of course, looking at this, the jungle near Calais. But again, it's not such a strange phenomenon. It has been part of Western European cities for the longest time. So that is the first zoom out that we decided to take from the refugee crisis to a much longer period in time. And the second zoom out was that we thought, well, now we're focusing on refugees, and of course they are the most problematic group and forced to flee and poor and from war-ridden countries. But in fact, migration is not limited to refugees. There's all these groups of people that actually come to live in our cities for a certain period of time only. Hi. Goedemorgen. And so we decided to make this an inventory of all these different groups. Think of international students. Every city has now a large number of international students. Or the digital nomads, the people who move from city to city with not much more than their computer connected to workplaces anywhere in the world. Or think of EU migrant workers like Polish, Romanian, Bulgarian workers who come to Western Europe for seasonal work or for a longer period. Asylum seekers, tourists, you could also regard as a kind of migrants, and of course expats, illegals, all these different groups with their own specific characteristics. So we decided, well, this is actually a part of the project that we did with the TU Delft. And we looked at these different groups of migrants, and especially looked at how are they represented in media and in the newspapers and in culture. And how did they actually get here? What is their trajectory of traveling? Where do they actually settle in their end destination country? What are the policies that every country has towards these different migrants? Because there's a policy geared towards every different group of migrants, and some are very limiting, as you can imagine, and some are very welcoming. And then what kind of work do the migrants do? What is their own economy? How are they part of the local economy, and how do they form their own? And of course, like I said, there's a huge difference between how these different groups are being received. And some are very welcome. International students, universities actually compete with each other to receive them and to attract them and have them follow studies at the TU Delft and Erasmus, whatever. And also expats, of course, are being welcomed, and every city has different programs to attract expats and have all kinds of facilities for them, to make life easy for them. And then there's this is the one end of the spectrum, the welcome end, and there's of course this other end. This is an image from 2015, of course, where the people, especially, well, the refugees, especially from countries with other religions, with less income, they are not welcome at all. During these years, 2016, 17, there was also a shift, which was very surprising to me, that also tourists were not being welcomed anymore. In certain places like Venice or Barcelona, and increasingly also in Amsterdam, people start complaining about the effect of tourism on their cities. Like they are saying in Barcelona, the luxury trip of tourists is my daily misery. And like in Amsterdam, with the start of Corona, people found out suddenly how their city really was without tourists, like half empty, and neighbourhoods where all the liveliness was basically gone because there was no one actually living there. It was all Airbnb. And of course, people are also being pushed out of the city because of this Airbnb. I would wonder if there's also Airbnb in the Afrikaanderwijk. Probably. It's not the most attractive neighborhood in the city, but well, Airbnb is probably everywhere. So, and of course, this also pushes people out. And this is all part of this huge international development in which the city centers are becoming more and more attractive and attracting tourists, being polished, restored, transformed in this very attractive environments with a lot of identity, and therefore also contradictory, becoming more and more the same. So these parts of the cities where the huge monuments are, which everybody goes to visit, they also turn into the environments that become more and more the same kind of touristy environments, which are completely polished and have a lot of visitors and are full of musea and scooters. While at the other, at the outskirts, in the periphery of the city, there's no scooters because they are, you can't leave them there, they are forbidden. I think that's still the case in Rotterdam South as well.
Sometimes they are not even on the map to leave your Felix.
Exactly. And that's this world. And strangely enough, that also becomes a kind of a similar place. So if you look at Marzahn or the banlieues, or I forgot the name of this building in Rome, Corviale. And you look at, this is Amsterdam West, but you could also look in Hoogvliet in Rotterdam. There's all these places in the periphery with the same kind of architecture from the 60s that are being considered not attractive at all, where no tourist would ever go, where there is no polished street pavement, where there is well, a lot of derelict buildings, and where also one specific type of migrants live. As you can also see on these images, it's often the guest workers, the poorer, it's not the expats who live here. So there is this division internationally between the center and the periphery of cities. And well, this is another map showing just a little bit of that. Shows how, well, for instance, this is Amsterdam. And it basically shows how migrants are living not in the center, but more and more in the periphery and in the outskirts of the city, and that their number is also rising. And of course, these things have are interrelated, because the center becomes more and more expensive, just like in Rotterdam. So people who can't afford it are pushed outside, and then the poorer migrants and newcomers are the first to move to these areas. And the same thing, can be seen. Well, this is also, this is Rome. You can see the same effect. And this is Berlin, which is slightly different, but also concentrations of migrants.
Would you say Afrikaanderwijk is like the border condition now? Like it, or
Yeah, I think it has been it has been the periphery for the longest time. So for a very long time, it was the place where migrants would move. It is also a little bit of an arrival city, if you know that that word. Doc Sanders coined that. So the place where newcomers would go when they first moved to a city. But now Afrikaanderwijk is in transition. So it's not this this periphery anymore, and that is because I will be talking about that later. But the center of Rotterdam and the attractive center, you could say, is slowly moving southward, and now it is reaching Afrikaanderwijk, and that's also why it's interesting, because it is transforming from this arrival city, migrant area, into something which is in between. Well, which is probably here, which is the Bos en Lommer of Amsterdam. So.
Yeah, because it's actually so close to the center.
Yeah.
If you hop on the metro, you are in 10 minutes, you are here.
Yeah.
So it's very easily reachable, connecting to the central station.
Yeah, it is. And for a long time, the psychological distance was huge.
Yeah.
But now, now this is becoming better. Then everybody is agreeing with you that it's very close.
I mean, when I moved here 8 years ago, people would not go over the bridge. Oh, because that's far or it's dangerous.
Yeah.
And now there's no one ever talks about that anymore.
Yeah.
Going south is something.
No, it's unimaginable, really, what has how much this area has changed. From when I moved here, for instance, because yeah, that was 30 years ago, and then it was these areas where we'll also go in the afternoon. It was purely junkies, trash, crime-ridden, you know, louche environment, but mostly drugs related, and well. A lot of these things are really hard to imagine now.
Would you say that there were, like 30 years ago, was it also more like homogeneous than now? Like now it's more mixed, or was it already mixed?
No. No, I would say that 30 years ago, the Afrikaanderwijk was basically Turkish, Moroccan. And so in that sense it was kind of homogeneous, because it was like first generation guest workers. And yeah, so in that sense the superdiversity had not made its entry. And there was still also this group of sort of, how do you say that, a Dutch, how do you, I have to yeah, find the right word every time, what is politically correct at this moment, but like authentic Dutch people, which I don't think you will find there anymore. Yeah, let's continue. So just to talk a little bit about what angles we took in the research. What we did is we chose a number of cities in Western Europe that were very different, but all had migration in common, but different in size, different in size of migration also. We looked for scholars in those cities and asked them to make this study for us. We gave them a list what we wanted to know, and they provided these articles that are in the book. Very extensive, very interesting, but very hard to draw conclusions from also, because it's like this mer à boire of different relations between the city and migrants, and basically providing us with a number of stories about migration, and not so much lessons like if you deal with migration then this is how you could do it. That's not exactly what came out of it. We did draw some conclusions of what we would advise cities to have as spatial policies to accommodate migrants in a better way. And I'll end with that. just to show some of the stories that came out of it. If you guys have ever been to Vienna, I'm sure that you've also been to the Wiener Ringstrasse, which is this fabulous architectural project, middle of the 19th century, a huge boulevard built on the former wall of Vienna that was demolished. And then, so it had this concert hall, it had the city hall, it had libraries, it has these fabulous architecture. And we found out that even though this is the image of Vienna, it is basically built by the Jewish community in Vienna, and had to do with the fact that there was a change in law. Before, Jewish people were not allowed to own land, and this law was changed in the middle of the 19th century. It coincided with this spatial project. So the Jewish people who had a lot of money in the bank resulting from this, that they couldn't spend it on anything expensive. So they basically developed this Wiener Ringstrasse. So it's not always, yeah, so this is a very strong project that that was developed by the migrant community. And another strong project, you could also say, is something like this. This is something that we also see in Rotterdam, like the Kruiskade or the Nieuwe Binnenweg. It is a street that was already there, but completely transformed by migrant economy. It was a city in downfall with a lot of empty shops, not attractive anymore, and then migrants, especially from the Balkan countries, took over, came in and had these different stores and shops and etc. To such a degree that they called it the Balkan Meile in Vienna. So a complete rejuvenation by migrant culture. And this is actually the same, like the new high street in London. In London, you have this system of high streets that go radially into the center, and that were always like the backbone of typically British life, where the pub would be on the corner and where the shops would be. And this is like the image in the, well, I think this is the 60s. Really lively and busy. This is the place where you would also always go. But for a number of reasons, it had declined, and the British people were well, very dissatisfied and complaining about this demise of the high street. And again, like in Vienna, the migrant culture economy took over to the degree that they are now basically lively streets again, but completely taken over by migrant stores. And another interesting story that you would never think of is this city called Prato near Florence. While Florence is the place that all the tourists go to, Prato is very near, but I don't think tourists would ever go there. It's much more of an industrial city. As you can see, this is the urban fabric of Prato. It consists of a lot of factories, and they are all run by Chinese. So it's the biggest Chinatown in Italy, and it consisted from these textile factories that were formerly run by Italians, and they moved out to the suburbs, and the Chinese moved in with all these interesting results. Not only do they have these textile factories, but also restaurants and other facilities for their community, with these strange mixes between Chinese and Italian food, and but also with problems. So the relations, for instance, between the workers and the factory was typically Chinese, with workers sleeping in the factory, a number of accidents and disasters, factories burning down that happened, and also animosity with the Italian original population, for which there were these cultural projects being initiated by the municipality to bring these groups together, to have outside events like this, the Piazza dell'Immaginario, where Italian and Chinese people would well, engage in cultural projects. And finally, also Aarhus was one of our cities, and this one showed how a spatial policy can be, over time, very effective to change really the identity of a city, because they started in the 1920s with this policy to attract students. They built a university, invested heavily in the architecture of both the university and the dormitories, but also in student life, so dormitories and yeah, also bars and etc. With as a result that the student population grew immensely, that Aarhus became known as a music city and as a place for nightlife, and then even they were chosen the best destination for young tourists by, I think, by Lonely Planet in 2016. So there is a steadily growth from first accommodating students, and then yeah, becoming into this tourist destination. So there is a way that you can invest to accommodate, and then yeah, this puts a whole chain of changes into place until this student city becomes the identity of your city. And I think in a way this happened to Rotterdam as well. So Rotterdam is, of course, has been a migrant city for the longest time. Has to do with its identity as a harbor, of course. And being so international, I don't think it's very strange that this has now become the city of super diversity, and the first city in the Netherlands that was this majority minority city. Yeah?
Really, like, it's like there are just so many scholarship opportunities, like
Yeah.
especially for PhDs. So like, can I graduate from, you know, yeah, when I finished my master's in London, I strongly advise to go to Provoost, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because there's this money there, so you should go there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually funny because I also did my Erasmus exchange to Aarhus.
Oh, really?
Architecture school there.
Yeah. Yeah, see, I'm not making it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but it's really like a very nice international community there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really nice exchange. But yeah, what you're saying is like that's more international students. I felt like than real Danish people there. So, but yeah.
Yeah, it's also not a very big city, of course, compared to
No.
Copenhagen. It's really a second city. And this is maybe also something for second cities, that they so consciously work on their identity. And now Rotterdam is for a number of years already, is really actively trying to get more expats, more international students, because I think that Amsterdam and even Utrecht are higher on the list usually for foreign students than Rotterdam.
Yeah. It's also funny because in the beginning when I moved to Aarhus, I've never been there, but I thought it was like Rotterdam. But then when I arrived there, it's so small, it's more like Delft or like a smaller city with a lot of students.
Yeah.
Yeah, so funny.
You said something about the transformation of this neighborhoods which were like in Europe more traditional Dutch or traditional Italian or traditional English, like maybe white Dutch.
Yeah.
And you said something about then the neighborhoods got into decline and then migrants came.
Yeah.
What were these reasons for decline, for example?
I think the most of the reasons, and it's the same with Afrikaanderwijk, the most reasons have to do with the quality of the housing stock. And there was this moment, especially in the 60s, 70s, when all this older housing stock that dated from beginning of the 20th century or a little bit older, became sort of derelict and didn't have the amenities and the sanitation that people wanted. And at the same time, there were all these conscious planning efforts outside of the city, building suburbs or complete new towns. Like in Rotterdam, you had all these, what they call the garden cities, Pendrecht, Zuidwijk, Lombardije, Hoogvliet. In London, you had the new towns, this circle. And so every city in Europe was actually building large-scale mass housing with modern bathrooms, for instance, a little bit outside of the center. So a lot of the white flight, a lot of the white population moved there, and then the older housing became empty and available for the incoming migrants and guest workers at the time. I think that's the main reason.
But I think this is a phenomenon in like almost all big cities, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And smaller cities too.
Yeah?
Yeah, you see it everywhere. But yeah, this is just to show you some of the well-known migrants that we have in Rotterdam. Because, well, you could say from the start of when the harbor really started to explode was in the 1880s. There were a lot of harbor workers needed, and they were not in Rotterdam, they were all imported. So they were all attracted, but as migrants, but they came from Brabant mostly. Brabant, Friesland, they came from the Dutch countryside. But I don't think you should underestimate that they were also newcomers, because at that moment in time, the difference in culture between people who lived in a big city in Rotterdam and who came from the countryside in Brabant, Brabantse boertjes, like little farmers, it was a huge difference. So there was also cultural clashes at that moment in time that would equal the cultural differences that we now have with, maybe more even, that we would now have with migrants. So a lot of migrant populations in Rotterdam, starting in the 19th century. But the really exotic groups from far away, from different nation states, that came in around the beginning of the 20th century, like this Chinese community that settled in Katendrecht. They started in the beginning of the 20th century, and they had this little Chinatown with the first Chinese restaurant over there. And maybe you know this one, the Angelo Betti Pizzeria, which is on the Schiekade. It's very good pizzeria, but well, they started, he's still there, but I think it's his grandfather started before the war already as an ice cream parlor, and it's still this traditional place. So they were Chinese, Italian, that was the pre-war groups. But of course, the quantity of migrants entered with the guest workers in the 60s, who were attracted mostly from Turkey and Morocco to work in the harbor. And here you see some of those, the guys coming from the east of Turkey and from Anatolia, etc., arriving by bus with their suitcases, mostly men who worked in the industry. And this is actually right next door here. You can see the post office in the background. So there was a bus office, a bus station, and they came all the way from Turkey, stopped there, and moved into the city. And not only worked in industry, but also, yeah, doing things like that, shoe polish. This was also not completely harmonious. And it had to do with, well, like this is the least harmonious moment in that migrants flow to Rotterdam. It was the Afrikaner riots, which happened in and around the Afrikaanderwijk in 1972, which had, well, a lot of components. It's often described as a racial thing. No doubt there was an element. But there was also this other element that we just talked about. A lot of Dutch people, white Dutch people, moved out of this area already to the suburbs, making Afrikaanderwijk a preferred neighborhood for the guest workers to move in, but mainly for Turkish entrepreneurs to buy certain of these houses and then start these Turkish pensions, Turkish hotels, which is a luxury word for housing 10 Turkish guest workers in one room, completely overpopulating the area. And also pushing out Dutch people. So I think this is, I studied it a little bit this weekend. It's very difficult to get the right data on that, but there was this Dutch woman whose rental contract was ended by the Turkish owner of the building. So a Dutch person was moved out because he wanted to start this much more profitable business of renting out to 10 or 20 Turkish guest workers. And then the bomb completely exploded, mainly because the white people who still lived there, they already lived in very bad circumstances, so their rental houses didn't have any normal bathrooms or sanitations or showers. And they saw their neighborhood gradually being taken over, being overpopulated, etc. So and they also felt left behind. They felt like the losers because everyone who could afford it moved out to all these new buildings. So there was this huge clash which lasted for over a week, and there was police, and this house was stormed, and all the furniture was thrown on the street. And it was mainly 2 streets were mentioned, of which one apparently was in Afrikaanderwijk but doesn't exist anymore, and the other street is a little bit outside of Afrikaanderwijk. So I still don't know. I wanted to actually find this particular spot where it actually happened, but I haven't been able to find it yet, even though there was on YouTube you can find some movies, so maybe you can look into it, but I think it would be interesting to see where.
That they kind of completely deleted it from the neighborhood.
Yeah, and they called the Afrikaner riots, but one is in the Wapenstraat, and that's not Afrikaanderwijk, it's Bloemhof, which is immediately south of it. And the other one was a street that I couldn't find on the map anymore. So also the urban renewal after it sort of erased some of the traces. But then, so these riots happened, and then, oh yeah, I'll be talking about that later, when I'll be talking about the assignment for this week. So you have to bear with me. I just want to finish this first part on the migrants in Rotterdam. This is the present groups, of course, that you see, Polish workers, and they form a part of the Rotterdam population now, more even in Schiedam, and also Westland, because they work in the agriculture a lot. Also about Polish people, there have been some riots and complaints that there were too many Polish supermarkets, Polish taking over. But actually there in 2018 were only 8,000 Polish workers living in Rotterdam on 500,000 people. So it's sometimes very strange to see what causes discontent and what doesn't. Like over here, of course, Rotterdam advertises itself with the Caribbean festivals, so that is, it also tries to attract these expats with fairs, etc. It wants to be internationally famous, it wants to be popular, and at the same time, this was also in 2016, when there were 15 people that had a status, so not asylum seekers, but status holders. They needed a place to live that was found in Hoogvliet, and then everybody was becoming totally angry. very strange. So this dichotomy, I think, is very deeply ingrained in Rotterdam. These two different trends towards migration.
Yeah, also in wise politics. I mean, Rotterdam is the most diverse city in the Netherlands, but also like the bakermat, the roots of populism, kind of been in the early years of this.
Yeah.
It's so strange contradiction.
No, that's absolutely true. And I think 2002 and Pim Fortuyn, and then the Leefbaar Rotterdam. Is that something that you know? It's one of those local parties that has as a name Livable Rotterdam. So they advertise themselves as the party of the normal people, but it's very much a law and order party. And they also instigated something which is called the Rotterdam-wet, which is basically, you could say, geared towards limiting the amount of poor migrants in a neighborhood. Has a lot of nuances, but that is what it comes down to.
Yeah, but actually, it's not that surprising that it emerged in Rotterdam being such a diverse city. Especially if you look at this fact that it became the first majority-minority city, you see that actually the group of native white Dutch inhabitants has been decreasing for decades already. And these are exactly the people that oftentimes have more difficulty relating to the super diverse society. So that also creates a lot of tension amongst this group, being also one of the triggers that the populism
Yeah. This is to finish this part on the city of comings and goings. Like I said, we try to translate this research into something like an advice or a future-oriented policy. And the first thing that we said was, we looked at actually how are we doing so far? How are we accommodating migrants and migration in our city so far? And we looked at these different cities that were researched in the book, the ones that I showed before, and sort of analyzed the projects that we saw there, which had something new to bring. One that you might know is the Startblok Riekerhaven. It's in Amsterdam, and it is a project that combines two groups of migrants, you could say, young refugees and international students. So these two groups that are actually common because of their age and maybe also because of their social needs and their interests are being housed in one block with the idea that they would help each other. And also there is a huge program with activities and events to bring those two groups together. So that is one project that is specifically for migrants. Another one, just to give you some very different examples, is the Bazaar West, which is in Aarhus. It's also in the Lonely Planet Guide. It's a tourist destination now, but it was actually started by the migrant community in one of those peripheral neighborhoods called Gelleroep. It's a commercial initiative by an entrepreneur from the Middle East, and it has all these bazaar-like qualities with lots of fruits, vegetables, restaurants, etc. And it's not only selling things, but it also provides a place to work for people in the neighborhood. And this Gelleroep is really very much like an arrival city, so it has a function in that. And then in the center of Aarhus, you will find this building, which is like real architecture. designed by Schmidt Hammer Larsen architects. But the interesting thing is that is its program. So it combines a library with the place where you can get your passport, with a place for schools and students to work, with a bar and a cafe for tea and coffee, etc. So it's this meeting space which provides the platform for both migrants as well as local Aarhus people. Something completely different is this app Move to Denmark, and it provides you with sort of help if you're from abroad, and then it helps you. You have similar apps also for furniture swaps. If you move into a country, you need a couch and a bed, and then you can offer it or get it. And these things are numerous, and we had this collection of 100, that's the furniture hire for a limited stay in the city, because more and more people are staying, well, just for a limited period. And this is also something that I really like, the bike project. You have it, there's now similar projects in a lot of cities. I think you also have it in Rotterdam. It is this project that repairs old bikes and then donates them to newcomers and migrants. And you can guess what effect that has, because if you're new in a city, your mobility is strongly limited if you don't have a bicycle. And if you have to pay for the public transport, it will cost you money, and it won't make you a part of public life and public space. So it's much more than just a bike. It has to do with how you experience your environments and where you can go. So also very sympathetic. And then these 100 projects, then we use them to actually make this city. So this is, you could say, it's like an image of a migration city, purely consisting of buildings that have something to do with migration. So all these 100, well, they're not all in here, but a lot. It's like the Norwegian church, which is in Rotterdam. It has spaces for the digital nomads, which sit around their computer. It has student housing, it has hotels, the gateways to Chinatown, etc., etc. The Moroccan fountain on the Noordplein in Rotterdam. And then, what would you need as a city to accommodate migration and migrants? And we tried to draw some conclusions from our research. And the first thing was, you need affordable housing and affordable workspaces. And that is what, as a city, you should do. And already then, 6 years ago, there was this lack of affordable housing, and by now you could say it's even more pressing. So this is still by far, it's the advice number one. And another advice would be like adaptability. Often we have spaces and houses, and especially in the Netherlands and well-arranged and organized countries, there is only one program that is allowed in a building. But why don't we make these spaces and the program that they can accommodate more adaptable and more flexible, so that we can use them in different ways? Because it's not like it used to be 40, 50 years ago, that our society is mainly static, that people move into a house, stay there for most parts of their life. And no, it's people come into a city and stay there for shorter periods. So let's accommodate the city in that way. And then also there is this tendency of using the container for migration. These two equal each other. So if you have temporary students, put them in a container. If you have migrants, house them in a container. And there's of course this idea that they will only stay for a limited period of time and then move back. But if they move back, the international students, there will be another student. So the buildings, we said, should be robust and permanent, so they can be the permanent vessel for these migrants. So don't use the container, make robust and beautiful buildings for this permanent phenomenon of migration. And then, shared space. This is about public space, that it should be possible in a city to at least be comfortable and meet each other or see each other and arrange and design public space in such a way that it is also accommodating for different groups of people. Well, of course, every city says that they want to do that, but what does it really what does it really mean? We, for instance, looked at one of the streets in Rotterdam West, which is the Schiedamse Weg. If you know it, it's in the middle of a migrant area. It has Moroccan, Iranian, Turkish shops, etc. They all have their own style, their own image, their own colors, and etc. But then the city reacts to that by creating a uniform strategy for the names. And then have these, so it says now, for instance, it says butcher or bar, and then it's all in these same white letters. So there is an uneasiness at the part of the city with this multi-diversity, with this super diversity, and that is being sort of brushed over by the graphic design of these letters. So how do you make the public space comfortable for everybody? You could also look at Afrikaanderwijk, which is also something strange. I'm really surprised that no one has protested against it, because half of the streets in Afrikaanderwijk are being named after generals and military people from the Boer War in South Africa. So I'm not sure if everyone feels represented by that. Well, and then include migrants in the economy and in the community. I mean, these are all very, you could say it's an open door, but it is the devil is in the details. So how do you actually do that? And then new icons, like this public library in Aarhus is a new icon that actually proclaims we are here for everybody, for newcomers, for migrants, for all people in Aarhus. And this is also something like in the Afrikaanderwijk they are now building this Huis van Zuid, the House of South. And yeah, this is sort of, it's about representation of everybody. That was the exhibition in Venice. Well, I'm going to leave it at this. It's again the city of comings and goings, but then in the carpet. And I think this is a good moment for a coffee break. This is, and for questions maybe first or after. But afterwards I will go into the Afrikaanderwijk. Thanks.